September 3, 1944. Northern France. Fuel gauges are almost empty. After the breakout from Normandy, the advance of George S. Patton's Third Army has become something rare in World War II momentum without resistance. German lines collapse, roads fill with retreating columns, entire towns are liberated before formal orders arrive. Then the engines stop, not because of enemy fire, not because of terrain, but because of fuel. At Supreme Headquarters, Dwight D. Eisenhower has made a decision. Supplies will not be concentrated behind a single thrust eastward. Instead, fuel will be distributed across a broad front shared among multiple armies advancing simultaneously. Patton believes the war could be ended before winter. Eisenhower believes overextension could lose it. Within days, the fastest advance in Western Europe will stall not at a defensive line, but at a supply line. And what is denied in September will be paid for in December. After Operation Cobra breaks the German front in late July 1944, Allied warfare in France transforms overnight. Hedgerow's stalemate gives way to maneuver. American armor pours through the gap. The German Seventh Army disintegrates west of the Seine. Roads become corridors of retreat rather than resistance. At the center of this acceleration is Patton's Third Army. His doctrine favors speed over consolidation. When resistance weakens, he does not pause to reorganize lines, he pushes through them. In August, his columns advance with unprecedented pace across Brittany, then pivot east toward the German frontier. The reports arriving at Allied headquarters describe a collapsing enemy. German formations are retreating in fragments. Bridges are abandoned intact. Prisoners are taken in numbers that suggest exhaustion rather than organized defense. For the first time since D-Day, the Western Front appears open. Patton argues that the moment is unique. German forces west of the Rhine are in disorder. If pressure is applied relentlessly, if fuel and ammunition are concentrated and armored thrust into Germany before winter could shatter what remains of organized resistance. The proposal is not reckless. It is bold, but it requires prioritization. Fuel stocks arriving through the beaches of Normandy are limited. Ports are not yet fully operational. Every gallon allocated to one army is denied to another. At Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower confronts a strategic choice. Concentrate resources behind Patton and attempt a decisive breakthrough, or maintain simultaneous advances across the entire Allied front, ensuring no sector is neglected, no flank exposed. The decision will not be framed as stopping Patton. It will be framed as preserving balance, but balance and momentum rarely coexist. And in early September 1944, momentum is already outrunning logistics. By early September 1944, the Allied advance has outrun its own infrastructure. The beaches of Normandy, never intended to sustain armies deep into France, remain the primary supply base. Major ports are either damaged or still in German hands. Rail lines are destroyed. Bridges lie in ruins. Fuel must travel by truck. The Red Ball Express begins operating at full intensity, thousands of vehicles moving day and night along designated routes, carrying gasoline ammunition rations. The system works, but barely. Distance consumes efficiency. Every mile east multiplies the strain. Patton's armored columns are now operating at the extreme edge of that system. Requests from Third Army headquarters are direct. More fuel, more ammunition. The German front, Patton argues, is unstable. Resistance is disorganized. If armored spearheads can reach the Rhine quickly, Germany may be forced into defensive coherence too late to recover. But the reports at Supreme Headquarters show a wider map. To the north, British forces under Bernard Montgomery are also advancing. To the center, American First Army continues pressing east. Air supply and ground logistics must be divided among all of them. Eisenhower sees the danger differently. If Patton is given priority and stalls deep inside Germany without secure flanks, the entire Allied line could become distorted. A single thrust might achieve dramatic penetration, but it could also create vulnerability if German forces regroup. The strategic philosophy guiding Eisenhower is consistent: maintain pressure across the entire front, prevent the enemy from stabilizing anywhere, avoid overcommitment to a single gamble. Patton's philosophy is equally consistent: exploit collapse before it hardens. The fuel allocations reflect Eisenhower's choice. Shipments are distributed. Third Army's requests are reduced. Units begin to idle. Tanks that had advanced hundreds of miles in weeks now wait for supply convoys that cannot keep pace. The German army, retreating in August, begins to recover in September, not because it has regained superiority, but because time has been granted. Patton's columns do not stop under enemy fire. They stop at empty fuel tanks. And in modern war, logistics is indistinguishable from strategy. By mid-September 1944, the debate is no longer about supply alone. It is about doctrine. At Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower formalizes the approach that will define the autumn campaign: a broad, continuous advance across the entire Allied line. No single army will receive overwhelming priority. No narrow thrust will outrun its neighbors. The reasoning is methodical. German resistance, though disorganized, is not annihilated. Intelligence reports indicate units reforming east of the West Wall. The Siegfried Line, long dismissed as obsolete, still exists. If one Allied army penetrates too deeply without synchronized support, German reserves could concentrate against it. Eisenhower's objective is not spectacle. It is certainty. By advancing everywhere at once, he intends to deny the German High Command any stable defensive anchor. Pressure applied across the front forces the enemy to defend everywhere or retreat everywhere. Patton disagrees. He argues that the enemy is already in motion and vulnerable. A concentrated armored thrust, fully supplied, could reach the Rhine before German forces reorganize. Speed, he insists, is itself security. A stalled front gives the enemy the time he currently lacks. Behind the debate lies an unspoken concern: coalition balance. To prioritize Third Army would mean diminishing others, particularly British forces in the north under Montgomery, who is advocating his own concentrated operation aimed at a rapid crossing into the Ruhr. Eisenhower refuses to choose between them. Instead, he chooses structure. Fuel allocations remain divided. Operations continue on parallel axes. Patton's advance slows further as ammunition and gasoline are rationed. The German army, once retreating in open columns across France, begins to occupy defensive positions with greater coherence. Bridges are destroyed deliberately rather than abandoned. Counterattacks increase in frequency. Momentum, once accelerating, begins to level. The decision for the broad front does not appear dramatic. There is no single moment of announcement, but by the end of September its consequences are visible. The Western Front has not broken into Germany. It has stabilized along it. By October 1944, the Western Front no longer resembles the chaos of August. German forces have not regained superiority, but they have regained structure. Defensive lines along the West Wall stiffen. Units that escaped destruction in France are reorganized, refitted, and redistributed. Reinforcements from the east and interior Germany begin arriving in greater numbers. The opportunity Patton believed existed in early September has narrowed. In the north, Montgomery advances a different solution: Operation Market Garden, a concentrated airborne and ground thrust through the Netherlands designed to leap the Rhine and bypass the Siegfried Line entirely. It is bold. It is also resource-intensive. Fuel and air transport assets that might have supported Patton's continued drive are now committed elsewhere. The gamble reflects the same strategic dilemma in another form: concentrate for breakthrough or advance everywhere methodically. Market Garden fails to secure its final bridge at Arnhem. The broad front resumes. Meanwhile, in the Ardennes forest, German planners begin assembling reserves for a counteroffensive. The pause along the Allied line has granted them the one commodity in shortest supply after Normandy time. Patton continues to press where he can. His army advances into Lorraine, capturing ground at cost. But the rapid exploitation phase has ended. The war has re-entered a familiar rhythm of set-piece battles and deliberate assaults. In December, the German Ardennes offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, erupts across a thinly held sector of the Allied line. The surprise is strategic. German forces exploit precisely the kind of extended front Eisenhower sought to avoid destabilizing. The broad advance had denied them a single target, but it had also spread Allied resources across a wide arc. Patton's Third Army pivoting north to relieve Bastogne demonstrates once again the value of mobility and concentration. But the fact remains. The winter campaign exists because the autumn breakthrough did not. The decision in September was not wrong in isolation. It preserved balance, it avoided overextension. But it also preserved the enemy long enough for him to strike once more. And the cost of that preservation would be measured in the cold forests of December. By the spring of 1945, Allied forces crossed the Rhine in strength. Germany collapsed within weeks. The war in Europe ended not in September 1944, but in May 1945. The decision to deny Patton priority fuel did not lose the war. It extended it. Historians have debated whether a concentrated thrust in early September could have ended the conflict before winter. The evidence remains inconclusive. German defenses along the West Wall were incomplete, but not non-existent. Supply lines would have stretched dangerously thin. A single armored spearhead deep in Germany might have faced isolation. Eisenhower's calculation was not timid. It was conservative. He sought certainty over speed. He chose a strategy that minimized catastrophic risk, even at the cost of delaying decisive opportunity. Patton's argument was equally rational. He saw collapse. He saw disorganization. He saw a fleeting window when enemy cohesion had not yet reformed. In his view, momentum was not merely advantage. It was the decisive condition of modern war. What September 1944 revealed was not a clash of personalities. It was a clash of strategic philosophies. Concentration versus distribution, speed versus security, decisiveness versus durability. The broad front prevented a single catastrophic overreach. It ensured no Allied army advanced beyond support. It maintained coalition balance between American and British commands. But it also granted the German army the time required to reconstruct defensive lines, to prepare the Ardennes offensive, and to force one final winter campaign. The fuel denied in September was not simply gasoline, it was time. And in wartime is indistinguishable from opportunity. Patton would continue to advance in 1945 with characteristic speed. His Third Army would cross rivers, liberate cities, and push into the heart of Germany. But the moment when momentum might have ended the war before winter belonged to a different season. It belonged to September, and it was measured not by enemy resistance, but by a decision made at a map table far from the sound of engines running dry.